to see all of you here. My name is Joe, and I'm the lead pastor here at Mirada Church, and we are so glad you've chosen to worship with us this morning. Yes, camp. I know, right? I promise to work on this. This past week was a busy week, but a beautiful week, as Melanie did get married yesterday, her and Stephen, which was beautiful. Yeah. So between that and writing this, I was on double duty last week, which I love to do, and it was my pleasure and my honor and a privilege to be able to officiate that wedding. What a beautiful, awesome ceremony it was. And I know they're just going to keep loving each other and loving God as they're already doing. So this morning, we continue in our tested series about the life of Joseph. And speaking of being tested, because he was tested his whole life, God was able to prepare Joseph with perfect power and timing to interpret Pharaoh's dreams, telling him Egypt will experience a 7-year super harvest, followed by 7 years of severe worldwide famine. Exactly. But is that all Joseph did, interpret those dreams? No. He showed brilliant initiative and came up with a plan to save the world from starvation, suggesting Pharaoh hires someone to save 20% of the grain from the good years to get Egypt through the bad. But even then, is that all Joseph did? No. Pharaoh then promoted him to second in all of Egypt to execute that plan, which Joseph did successfully. Meanwhile, back in Canaan, what are Joseph's brothers doing? Exactly. Twiddling their thumbs, staring at each other, whining about being hungry. You remember this from last week? Father Jacob then almost quite literally kicked his whiny man-children out the door and sent them to Egypt for food. But he made sure to keep his youngest and new favorite son, Benjamin, behind. Remember, Joseph was the old favorite. But now that he's dead in his mind, his new favorite is Benjamin. What produced such a difference in character between Joseph and his brothers? It's on the screen. Joseph's testing. Because of his testing, Joseph was able to save the world. And now, it's his idle, self-centered, untrustworthy brother's turn to be tested. So when they went to Egypt to get food, and Joseph's in charge of that, when Joseph saw his brothers for the first time in 20 years, after they left him for dead in a pit until selling him into slavery, all because he was Jacob's favorite son, what did Joseph do? Did he kill him? Did they hug it out while singing Kumbaya? What happened? Joseph tested him. Joseph kept his identity a secret and allowed God to use him to test his brothers. For more details on that testing, take a look at last week's message on our church's YouTube channel. But anyway, bottom line, the testing ended with Joseph keeping brother Simeon behind in jail until what? Until the other 9 go home and bring little Benny back to Egypt. Why? To prove they haven't done to Jacob's new favorite what they did to the old favorite. He wants to see if they've changed. Just before leaving to go back home, Joseph secretly placed the silver they used as payment for their grain back into the brothers' packs. As a test? No, I believe as a promise. A promise that forgiveness for all wrongs ever committed is free. Just like that grain, when ready to be accepted. But since they didn't pass their testing, yet only managed to land somewhere in the middle of pass and fail, closer to fail, they weren't ready to accept. They weren't ready. Because when one of the brothers discovered silver on the way home in their bag, they finally mentioned God's name. But was it in a positive way? No, it was in a very negative light. Genesis 42:28 says, their hearts sank, and in a trembling voice asked, what is this that God has done to us? Why say this? Why say this to free grain during a worldwide famine. Because until we fully submit ourselves to the Lord's testing, we will never understand just how no strings attached God's forgiveness is, how free it is. We will always sit there in our guilt saying, there's no way this is free. I am in way too much trouble to be treated this lovingly. Until we've given ourselves to God's testing, we will always at some level feel like we've ripped God off and he's going to come collect soon. This right here is where we stopped last week, kind of on a cliffhanger, right? And the drama, well, it ain't over yet. You guys ready for more? Here it comes, all right? So the 9 get home, and the first thing they do is tell Jacob everything. Or do they? Let's read it all the way through and then break it down. Genesis 42:30. This is the brothers talking to Father Jacob. The man who is Lord over the land spoke harshly to us and treated us as though we were spying on the land. But we said to him, we are honest men. We're not spies. We were 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in Canaan. Then the man who is Lord over the land said to us, this is how I know whether you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me and take food for your starving households and go. But bring your youngest brother to me, so I will know that you are not spies, but honest men. Then I will give your brother back to you, and you can trade money for grain in the land again. All right, so landing in the middle of pass and fail when it comes to being tested means not all bad, but not all good either. So let's start with the good. Let's cover both, okay? Let's start with the good. The last time these boys came back to dad minus one brother, what happened? They lied, right? They lied about why they were minus a brother, claiming he was torn apart by a wild animal, when in truth, they left him for dead in a pit until they sold him into slavery. But this time, what are they doing? They're speaking the truth. They're speaking the truth about why they're down a man. And not only that, they're actually ready to go back and rescue him. So there's the good, right? Lots of improvement. Now the bad. Did anyone catch what they repeat 3 times in just 5 verses? We are honest men. Really? These guys are working overtime to cover the fact that while they were honest with their dealings in Egypt, they are not honest men overall. They lied to Jacob 20 years ago. They lied to Joseph in Egypt. And here, they're lying to their father again. This is simply a consequence of landing in the middle of passing and failing. They grew a little bit, quite a bit, yeah, but they just aren't there. And what happens next is further proof of that. Verse 35. As they were emptying their sacks, there in each man's sack was his pouch of silver. When they and their father saw the money pouches, they were frightened. On their way home from Egypt, only one of the 9 opened their sack to find silver, right? Which I believe, as mentioned before, symbolizes forgiveness when ready to be accepted. Were they ready to accept? We already talked about that. Not at all. They were not ready to accept. So much so that they didn't even bother to search the other sacks of grain after they found the first one. I believe they didn't believe it was even possible that it could happen. Just one sack of returned silver already blew their minds, so it didn't even occur to them to look in the other bags right away. So when they get home and unload the rest of the grain, it's as if you told me the Angels were a good baseball team again. I mean, just impossible. I wouldn't have believed it. I wouldn't have believed it. What's my point here? Not only is forgiveness intimidating for those who haven't fully submitted to God's testing, they most often don't even bother go looking for it. They don't even go looking for it. It doesn't even cross their minds to do so. But forgiveness is so big, we can't avoid it forever. Meaning, when it's one day inevitably poured out at our feet like grain in silver, are we going to be refined enough to appreciate it? Or remain unsubmitted to our testing and continue to be too intimidated to accept? Which one are we going to be? Unfortunately, the brothers' intimidation not only imprinted upon their yet-to-be-tested dad, but Jacob's lack of testing becomes very apparent in what he has to say next. You think the brothers are bad? Check out this pity party. Verse 36. You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me. Pity party town, population Jacob. I mean, honestly. Now, don't get me wrong. Losing any child at any age, nothing to be taken lightly. I can't even begin to imagine that kind of pain. And in Jacob's mind, Joseph is gone. But is Simeon really no more? And does taking Benjamin automatically mean permanently taking Benjamin? And is he really deprived of all his children? And is everything really against him? He has 4 wives, tons of grandkids, plenty of cash, and 9 older boys who've done a lot of spiritual growing up recently. So I don't know about you, but I think it's high time for Jacob to be tested. Which we'll discuss later. It's coming. But for now, let's check in on the progress, or lack thereof, of Reuben's testing. Now, Reuben is Jacob's firstborn. I skipped him last week for a reason. We're going to get to it here. As the oldest, Reuben was in charge of his brothers. Yes, Jacob favored Joseph in the past and tried putting him at the top, but the brothers hated him, right? They didn't follow Joseph. They didn't listen to him. So as the oldest, they looked up to Reuben. And as the oldest, they considered him in charge. And included in those responsibilities is being the one who spoke to Jacob on the brothers' behalf. He was the brothers' spokesperson to Father Jacob. So with all that in mind, let's rewind 20 years to the day that the brothers decided to kill Joseph and throw him in a pit and then tell Dad that a wild animal tore him apart. They were about to do that. That was their plan. That's what they said. But then Reuben, the oldest, the one in charge, catches wind of this plan, and he speaks up. Genesis 37:21b. Let's not take his life, Reuben said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this pit here. Sure, go for it. But don't lay a hand on him. Now, before you clap and say, oh, good guy Reuben to the rescue, check out verse 22b. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and then take him back to his father. You see what's going on here? After Jacob is distraught over his dead son, Reuben's going to pull Joseph out of the pit, bring him home, and throw his brothers under the bus by saying, look, Dad, your favorite son is home. Your other sons wanted him dead, but not me. Can I be second favorite now? But did things go as planned? You might remember, Reuben wanders off at just the right time. We all know this is God's timing. Reuben wanders off at just the right time. Traveling merchants come by, and Joseph's brothers are like, dude, Reuben's not around. Here's our chance. Let's make some money and sell Joseph. Hurry before he comes back. And that's what they do. Fast forward 20 years. And the brothers are in the thick of being tested. Joseph has thrown him in jail for 3 days. And finally, some growth happens. Because while in jail, they finally recognize their testing. finally realize it's because of what they did to Joseph, and finally remember the pain they caused him. So growth is finally happening in these knuckleheads' minds. And as the leader, the spokesperson, as the one the rest of them look up to, you know what that guy says? You know what Mr. Brain Trust Reuben says during this time of growth? I almost never, and I mean never, this might be the second time in the 7 years I've been here, I almost never use the Message translation of the Bible. But, man, does it nail Reuben's rude interruption during a divine, spiritually pivotal moment and terrible response. It just nails how he interrupts this great talk with a terrible response. Here it is, Genesis 42:2. Reuben broke in, as in disrupted the brothers solemnly talking about their testing and growing. He breaks in, he interrupts this conversation and says, "Didn't I tell you not to hurt the boy?" But no, you wouldn't listen. And now we're paying for his murder. I told you so? That's all leader Reuben's got for his brothers? During this pivotal time of growth and testing, that's what he's saying? They're trying to grow and mature, and all the leader can say is, "I told you so"? Fast forward a little bit further. They're back home with Dad, and just told him that the only way Simeon comes back home is if they take Benny the Fave to Egypt, right? Then, as we talked about earlier, Jacob goes full pity party, saying Joseph's gone, Simeon's gone, now Benjamin's gone, everything is against me. And what, at this point, does the guy in charge of speaking to Jacob say? Genesis 42:37. "Listen, Dad, you may put both of my sons to death if I don't bring them back to you. Entrust them to my care, and I will bring them back." While some might call this determination, I personally think it's the desperate appeal of a leader whose leadership is diminishing due to failure in testing. Two reasons I believe that. First of all, the dramatic, desperate, unnecessary language. Old Testament, what language originally? Hebrew. Put to death in Hebrew is actually one word, and it describes exclusively executing criminals for punishment. So what he's saying here, in a desperate attempt to remain leader, "Listen, Dad, I'm still the man. Trust me. I'll bring Benjamin and Simeon back, but if I don't, go ahead and kill both your grandkids like dirty criminals." If he really, and I mean really, wanted to offer up his own kids' lives and really thought it was a good idea, then why not rationally offer them as a sacrifice? There's a whole bunch of Hebrew words for sacrifice. Does he use them here? Or, better yet, keep your innocent kids out of it and offer yourself. Why his kids? Because I don't think he was in a rational state of mind. I think he was grasping at straws. I think he was desperate. Diminishing leadership here just makes him say crazy things. Secondly, the second reason why I think this is just desperation, this right here is the last time you'll read Reuben talking, ever. From now on, a new spokesperson does all the talking with Jacob. Why? I believe Reuben's brothers lost faith in him as a leader. I believe Reuben's brothers lost faith in him as a spokesperson. And I believe Jacob never wants to hear any other horribly desperate ideas coming out of his mouth ever again. All because he wouldn't submit to his testing like his brothers. So who's the new spokesperson? Who's the new leader of the pack? We'll get to Mr. Special soon, but for now, let's continue talking about Jacob, all right? Let's continue talking about Jacob. As evidenced by his woe is me outburst earlier, he is in dire need of testing. And I get it, while it happened in the worst way possible, Reuben actually presented Jacob with said necessary testing. Entrust Benjamin to my care. Yes, framed horribly, don't get me wrong, but the testing is in there. And trust him. Let him go. How is it a test? I just told you. It's to see if he would finally drop the favoritism label on his kids. To see if he'd finally drop the favoritism act. Is he finally gonna love us? Is he finally gonna love a son not named Joseph or Benjamin as much as he loves Joseph or Benjamin? Is he finally gonna let Benjamin, his favorite, go to Egypt so that one of his non-favorites, Simeon, can come home? Is he gonna drop the favoritism, or is he gonna grip onto it tightly? Again, while not presented in the best way, let's see how Jacob responds to this test. Verse 38. My son Benjamin will not go down there with you. His brother Joseph is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow. Jacob failed his first go at this test in 3 huge ways. First of all, I can almost in italics, almost understand saying no if he was only talking to Reuben. Almost get it. However, Old Testament in what language originally? In the original Hebrew, the yous used here are plural and mean you all. Jacob didn't only not trust Reuben and his crazy idea, he didn't trust any of the others who've shown considerable growth in character since returning from Egypt. Secondly, Joseph is dead and Benjamin is the only one left. Ouch. Last time I checked, there are 9 others. Joseph and Benjamin were the only sons that truly counted in Jacob's eyes. How do you think that made the others feel? Especially when they're ready to risk their lives to go back to Egypt to bring Simeon home. That favoritism runs deep. Third, in Jacob's mind, Joseph's dead, right? If Benjamin dies too, well, Jacob would also die because evidently the other 9 aren't enough to keep life worth living. Again, how does that make the brothers feel? That favoritism runs deep. He's got a grip on it and will not let it go. In Southeast Asia, many, many years ago, I'm talking over 100 years ago, native tribesmen developed an ingenious method to catch monkeys alive for show, for zoos, to sell them to people, right? You see, what would happen is the native would securely tie a tall jar to a thick branch of a tree. The jar itself was thin, tall, and had a very narrow opening. Within the jar were small chunks of fruit. When the monkey notices the fruit, it reaches into the narrow opening with an open, empty hand and grabs hold. But as it attempts to pull the fruit out of the jar, the monkey finds its closed fist is too wide to come back out. It is now trapped as the native approaches. All the monkey has to do to escape is what? Let go. But it refuses. It struggles. All it does is grab onto the fruit even tighter while still trying to pull his hand out of the jar. It is trapped by nothing more than its own selfish desire and cannot see that freedom without the fruit is more valuable than capture with it. The monkey is his own prisoner, held by food. Jacob is his own prisoner, held by favoritism. What do we hold ourselves prisoner to? Is it unhealthy pride? Is it past regret? Is it our own plans? Is it lust? Is it unrighteous anger? Is it our need to be right all the time? Is it our thoughts and feelings of who's currently in office? Is it our thoughts and feelings of who we think should be in office? Is it an unending grudge against a person, group, belief, or ideology that just drives us crazy and keeps us obsessed? Is it discontentment? Is it a giant, unending pity party? Because I'll tell you what, the only one showing up to that party and never leaving is Satan himself. You ain't getting anyone else that comes to it. Church, we must let go and run away. Run away straight to Jesus and submit to his testing. And while that may feel like we're stuck all over again because it's hardly ever fun, it's the freest we will ever actually be. Weeks, possibly months, go by where Simeon is stuck in an Egyptian jail because of Jacob's refusal to let Benjamin go. I bet you he's thinking, this is how Joseph felt. Abandoned by the rest of them. And I bet you Joseph's sitting there thinking, these brothers didn't change at all. And all these thoughts are going through all these guys' minds. Why? Because of Jacob's refusal to let Benjamin go. But the famine is still raging, right? It's not going away. And eventually, Jacob and company, they run out of grain. So he tells his boys, what does he tell them? We need more food. Back to Egypt you go. But the boys know they cannot go back to Egypt for food without a certain favorite someone. So they send in spokesperson Reuben to talk some sense into the old man. Nope. Genesis 43:3. But Judah said to him, that crazy Egyptian warned us. He warned us solemnly. You will not see my face again until your brother is with you. If you will send our brother along with us, then sure, Dad, we'll go down and buy some food for you. Why is Judah the spokesperson now? You see, while Reuben was failing at his testing, Judah was improving. And I mean especially in how he deals with the crazies of his family. I mean, this guy is genius in how he deals with his cranky, old, favoritism-loving dad and slowly maturing but still very whiny brothers. This guy is a wordsmith because I believe he's submitted to God's testing and God's giving him the wisdom to give him the right words to speak. I mean, it's truly genius because after Judah says this, right here, after he says this, that's when Jacob starts. You could read on several verses. Jacob blows up with his favoritism again. Why did you bring trouble on me? And why did you tell that Egyptian about Benjamin? You should have just kept your mouth closed because Benjamin. And then his brothers start getting all whiny back at Dad. Dad, you think you could have done better, old man? I mean, the guy was firing questions about us, about the family. How are we supposed to know he'd demand that we bring Benjamin back to Egypt? Why don't you go next time and go get the food? And Dad's complaining, and Brother's whining, and everyone's blaming everyone back and forth, and the crowd starts chanting, Jerry, 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 right? And it's just like everyone is just mad and screaming and blaming each other. And then finally, the one guy with some character and maturity speaks up above the rest. It's not there, but I can picture it. He pounds on the table and gets everyone's attention. Stop yelling. And listen to what I have to say. Verse 8. Then Judah said to his father, send the boy along with me, and we will go at once, so that we and you and our children may live and not die. Those last few words, may live and not die. Sound familiar? Sound familiar? In last week's passage, while his sons were sitting there twiddling their thumbs and whining about being hungry, Jacob called them out saying, why do you just keep looking at each other? I heard there's grain in Egypt. So, side by side with what Judah says here, Jacob then continues with, go down there and buy some grain for us so that we may live and not die. Let me show you on the screen right here, on the next slide. Do you see what Judah just did? high-five Judah, using his dad's exact words. Almost word for word. Basically saying, Dad, we only want to do what you told us to do. So give us Benjamin so that we can obey your orders. Remember when you yelled at us? Remember when you kicked us out the door? We're ready. Just give us what we need to go and we'll do it. Genius. And it doesn't even end there. Verse 9. I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him here before you, I will bear the blame before you all my life. That's some serious anti-Reuben stuff right there, isn't it? Couldn't be more opposite. No talk of killing anyone if Benjamin isn't returned. No bringing innocent children into it. Judah is saying if Ben isn't brought back, no one else is dying, no one else is being killed, no one else will be held responsible except for me. Compare Reuben and Judah and tell me what caused the huge difference between them. I believe one submitted to God and is refining and the other didn't. After Judah's refined, spiritually mature speech, Jacob agrees to let Benjamin go. But does he do so jubilantly? Verse 11. Then their father Israel said to them, well, if it must be. He wasn't thrilled, but he agreed. Like a majority of his boys now, Jacob's somewhere in the middle of passing and failing his testing, which is exactly why he kind of begrudgingly lets him go, and which is exactly why before he sends everyone off, we find Jacob saying the following, verse 14. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back with you. As for me, if I am bereaved, I am bereaved. Church, this is the most middle thing to say ever. This guy's flopping worse than a fish on land. Good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, because this guy is right down the middle, just like most of his sons. Remember, not all good, not all bad. Let's start with the good, okay? Let's start with the good. He petitions God for mercy, calling him God Almighty. Almighty, meaning mighty enough to be in control of this very serious situation. So he starts off great. Then nosedive. Benjamin and your other brother. Benjamin gets to be called by name, but Simeon's been relegated to the other brother. That favoritism, it's not gone yet. And now the last statement. If I am bereaved, I am bereaved. This phrase is so down the middle that within the phrase itself I find good and bad. Okay? Old Testament written in what language originally? Hebrew. To be bereaved means to be made completely childless. Here's where this statement is bad. If Jacob tragically loses Benjamin, is he completely childless? How does that sound to his other sons? Just like what he said earlier. Joseph's gone and I only got one left. That favoritism is still there. But, and you really got to put on your goggles here to really look deep. But here is where you can find plenty of good in this statement. Possibly borderline great. If Jacob said this in faith, which within his struggles I believe he wants to. Let's put it that way. Within his struggle, I believe he wants to. If he said it within faith, then this right here is actually true submission to God. This right here is no longer a clenched fist in a jar. This is an open hand to God, saying, here, God, here's my favoritism. Here's my only son, Benjamin. I am offering him up to you, and if it aligns with your will that I never see him again, as awful as that would be, then your will be done. If I am bereaved, I am bereaved. You see where you could find good in there? You can see where that faith is starting to break through, where that refining is starting to take place. And my prayer for us, for this church, for the church worldwide, is that we have the fortitude to say and do the same. To offer all that we have, and all that we are, and all that we love, all up to God. No more clenched fists. God, take it all. All my sins I hold on to way too dearly. All my anxieties and my worries that drag me down. Even all the good things in my life, like my family, loved ones, and friends, and gifts and talents. To give it up to God, it's terrifying. It's unnerving. It's even straight up unnatural. Yet open hands up to God is true freedom. The freest we will ever be. You see, it was terrifying, unnerving, and unnatural for Jesus to offer up his life by being nailed to a cross while facing the Father's wrath for our mistakes. Because right before that it was going to happen, and he knew it was going to happen, what request did he make to his Father in the Garden of Eden? May this cup be taken from me. May it pass. I don't want to. But, Jesus knew his death meant freedom. True freedom. So right after saying, may this cup pass from me, I don't want to do it, he offered up his life with open hands, saying, nevertheless, not as I will, but you will. So take it. Take it. And this morning, we remember that sacrifice, offering us true freedom through the partaking of communion, with the bread representing his body broken and the juice his blood shed. So when the worship starts, as you feel led, head to the back where you can grab communion and partake. But before you partake, and after thanking Jesus for his sacrifice, examine your hearts and your lives. What's got your fist currently clenched in a jar? What do you need to offer up with open hands, saying, God, whatever you do with whatever I have, may it be well with me. May it be well with my soul. Just take it. Offer that up to him today, during communion, during this time. Would you pray with me as we bless this time of communion and worship? Dear Jesus, thank you for coming to earth, living a perfect life, dying on the cross for our sins, and rising from the grave. While it's terrifying, unnatural, and unnerving, may we offer up, all of us, the good and the bad and the sinful and the holy, all of it, while saying, whatever you do with whatever I have, may it be well with me and with my soul. Because it is then we find true freedom and true life in you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.